What the hell? NG, thank you so much for the gift sub. Thank you. It is so good to see all you guys in chat. I'm glad you are here. This is an adventure for me. This is episode 2 of our Telling Tales, Weaving Worlds series. I guess it officially is a series now that we're in episode 2. And yeah, I hope this one isn't too boring. This one's going to be a little bit about the mechanics of telling a story. I just got done with Foreign Food Friday over on Discord and talked a little bit about this, but the focus of this one is going to be the things that when I'm reading a story or reading a book tend to pull me out of the immersion because of some sort of stumble in the writing. Hydrate, thank you. So I want to help you guys not do those things so that when you write stuff, people can enjoy the story. Stretch, thank you. And another stretch, thank you. All right, so without further ado, we're going to try this. I haven't done a PowerPoint through OBS before, but it appears to be working so far. And let me cue up the theme music because we have theme music. You guys ready? I have no idea how loud this is going to be. Hang in there. All right. That was totally worth it. I commissioned that. Okay. Let's put some chill vibes on in the background. Let's do that. Yeah, that's a nice vibe. I dig that. When I mentioned theme music, yeah, of course. I'm trying to be a professional here. Trying and failing to be a professional here. Okay, so, wait, what? Making and coming up with tips about storytelling? Wouldn't that make this urban tales? You mean urban legends? I mean, same, but yeah. I've never heard it called urban tales. Interesting, but urban legends for sure. All right. We're going to give this a shot. See if I can click through this thing. Leave my grammar alone. Ah, baby. Start with that. And that is why we are here. I saw the best, tweet the other day. It was a screen cap from, a shitty classroom porn. And they were like, you know it's porn when grammar is spelled wrong on the chalkboard. And it was. All right, we gotta do this. Okay, so today we are going to talk about the things that break immersion for the reader and or make your writing weak. Because you can't tell a good story if you don't have the mechanics down. You might have the best possible idea for a story, and it might legit be the best story. But if you can't get it out there in a way that people can enjoy and immerse themselves in, it does not matter. So I have read some amazing concepts before that the people couldn't find a coherent sentence with 2 hands and a flashlight. And it's depressing because it's not that difficult to follow the rules. I know English is not the easiest language to do this with. Also, caveat, these are going to be American rules. There are different punctuation rules in different countries, obviously, including English-speaking countries like the UK and Australia. So bear that in mind. This is all an American perspective. I was trained vigorously in American journalism, so make of that what you will. Write that down. Yes, write it all down. So yeah, so that's the point we're going to get to. I'm going to try and hit on things that specifically bug me. This is non-comprehensive, and I'm going to say that on every slide just in case there's any doubt, but this is non-comprehensive. I want to make sure you guys understand that I am not a teacher. I am not This is not a master class. This is just me hitting on some stuff that personally bugs me that can make your writing stronger if you just make sure not to do it. So let me make sure that music isn't too loud. Is that okay volume-wise? Is the chill vibe okay? Because some of these songs have words and I don't want them to be distracting before we get too deep into the weeds here. Seems okay? All right, cool. All right, let's dig in then. Yep, that's today. Punctuation, word choice, and other mechanics of telling a really good story in an engaging way. And again, you guys are creative people. I'm sure most of you have some really good stories inside you. It's just a matter of getting them out. So I love this art too. This is really pretty. All right, let's talk about punctuation. I'm only going to hit on the 4 things that bug me the most because we don't have all day. Aqua, hello. Thank you so much for the sub. 27 months, that's a lot. Thank you. All right. Again, American style and non-comprehensive. The stuff that we need to know about punctuation could fill and does fill entire textbooks. We're not going to dig into all that. Hydrate, thank you. Back at you, Kalana Steel Wolf. Lots of hugs for everybody. All right. Commas. Let's talk about commas. Where to start? Commas are one of the easiest things to screw up. And I'm not entirely sure why, because commas are one of the things that has pretty set rules. For example, most people will use commas in a way that they speak. They will place a comma where they think a pause should go. And that makes sense conversationally. But if you're writing a story, if you're writing something for publication or that you hope is going to be published, and not just self-published, but picked up, it's important to know that you cannot write conversationally. You have to write in a style that is meant for reading. So with commas, a couple of things apply. Obviously, you use them to set off clauses like introductory clauses, things like to at the end of a sentence, like I like that too, comma to, things like that. But what I'm thinking more about are 2 specific things: comma splices and commas in a series. Hello, King J. So commas in a series are basically lists. So you say, I want to buy eggs, comma, milk, comma, and bread. Right. The comma before the and bread is the Oxford comma. You don't have to have it in American English. That said, I love the Oxford comma and I will die on this hill. It's important. There's so many examples where not having an Oxford comma does change the meaning of the sentence. Please use the Oxford comma. I like it. Just fucking use it. But yeah, you need to set off things in lists with commas, unless the things in your list are large chunks that have commas within themselves, in which case use semicolons, and we will get to that. Die on the hill, queen. Hell yeah. The other thing is comma splices. Comma splices are when you join 2 independent clauses with a comma and you don't use a conjunction. Let me tell you what all of that means. Independent clauses are basically a sentence that can stand alone. Like, I like cheese. That's an independent clause. You don't need any modifiers on that. You don't need any, anything. It's a sentence, basically. If I wrote, I like cheese, comma, I also like bread, that's a comma splice. You can't just attach 2 independent clauses to each other with a comma. You can't do it. What you need is a conjunction. Conjunctions are things like and, but, so, those connecting words. So I like cheese, comma, and I like bread. Now you're cooking. Now you have fixed it. The funny thing is, in that first case with the comma splice, you can use a semicolon. And again, we'll get to that. Semicolons are easily my favorite punctuation mark. If you don't have a favorite punctuation mark, you really should. Punctuation's fun. But I like semicolons. I also think they're underused and underappreciated. I feel like people are afraid of semicolons, and there's no reason to be afraid of semicolons. Semicolons are nice. Anyway, so that's commas. There's a couple of things about commas that I'm going to touch on, but I feel like commas are the thing that people just sort of put into stuff when they feel like there needs to be a pause or whatever. please don't do that. Just, if you need a refresher, there are some amazing tutorials online about how to use commas properly. I really don't want to get too into the weeds on this. I'm trying to keep this fairly light. So yeah, but commas are one of those things, if you're reading something and there's just a bunch of extra commas in there for no reason, you can tell that the person was putting them where they thought pauses should be, like if you're reading it, if you're speaking it, but that's not how writing works. And if someone's reading your manuscript with an eye for publication or an eye for considering publication, that's just going to distract them. Too many pauses is going to distract them. Commas, just, you can't just pepper them in. You can't just like sprinkle them in like seasoning, unfortunately. It is too bad. Now, that said, another caveat, when I send like DMs or even tweets, I will frequently break these rules because conversational is different. If you're not writing for publication, sometimes if you use every rule, like in the context of a tweet or the context of a DM, you come across as kind of insufferable, let's face it. Like, it can be, it's sort of like, do you guys, like when your parents send you a text, do they end it with a period? Because I hate that. My mom will send me a text, and she ends it with a full stop, and I'm like, am I in trouble? What did I do? Like, it's so serious, and it's so heavy. It's just a text. Like, you don't need to have a full stop on it. It feels weightier than it needs to be. Yeah, it makes you scared. Exactly. So yeah, conversational versus publication. So what we're talking about specifically is if you're trying to get somebody to read your manuscript with an eye to making it into something, and that does not apply. So if I send a tweet that's got shitty grammar, the last thing I need is for you guys to be like, oh my God, you didn't follow your own comma rules. You're goddamn right I didn't, because I don't want to be an insufferable ass. There's a time and a place. Just like anything else, there's a time and a place for these rules. There's a time and a place for just being a conversational, who gives a shit kind of thing. So when people correct your grammar in a YouTube comment section, yeah, punctuation is important. I mean, I don't just go out and not use punctuation in my tweets and stuff, but I'm not going to necessarily stick a comma before the to at the end of a sentence because it's not needed there in a conversational context. It's just not. And it can be distracting. Like sometimes if I get DMs from people who are absolutely hardcore attached to using their punctuation properly, it is actually distracting because it's not the context for it. From my perspective, again, all of this is my perspective. Your mileage may vary. Narrative dialogue. Okay. Dialogue in general, you can fudge a little bit because obviously if you're writing dialogue, people are speaking and you want to make sure you convey the conversationalness of that. That said, it can still be distracting to either overuse or underuse commas in that context. You still kind of, if you're writing this stuff down and you want it to be published, you kind of need to make sure you're still following the rules to a point. You can convey a lot more with word choice in that context than you can with punctuation, honestly. And I'm trying to think of a good example of this. Actually, I'll get to that because we are going to talk a little bit about this later, but ad break. Okay, ad break. Woo. Ad over. Yeah, and Halo in the chat is a writer, is a published author. So Halo is also very knowledgeable about the process and is also an editor. So gets to clean up this shit on the back end for other people. Lucky Halo. Being an editor is not the funnest job. I both loved and hated when I was an editor because on the one hand, it's like I didn't have to write it. So in ways it is easier to clean up. But on the other hand, it's like there's a part of your brain screaming, why? Why did you write this? This is terrible. I can't believe I have to edit this. And sometimes you don't really know where to go with it either. Like sometimes if you get something and you're like, I'm not sure how to make this better without just rewriting it. And I am guilty. I have been guilty in the past as an editor of just rewriting stuff for people because it is just that bad. And that's not helping anyone. That's a bad thing. Don't do that. So, I'm guilty. All right, let's move on. Semicolons, my favorite. Yay! Okay, semicolons. Basically a baby stop. You like a period light. I love semicolons. You can join two independent clauses with a semicolon provided that they have something to do with each other, more or less. Like that, it's a very vague rule, but that's kind of the gist. If they have something to do with each other, so if I say I like cheese semicolon, I also like bread, that is completely legit. If I say I like cheese semicolon, your dog has fleas, those two things aren't anything to do with each other, and they probably shouldn't be joined by a semicolon. That's really it. I like cheese, lightsabers are cool. Exactly. Those don't go together. But yeah, that's really it. And semicolon, they're not difficult to use, but they scare the shit out of people, and I don't understand why. Now, again, caveat, they can be overused. I hate reading stuff where someone's trying to sound smart and they use a semicolon every other sentence, and it's like, for the love of God, like, and we'll again get to this on varying sentence structure, but they can be overused. Use a semicolon for this, please. Exactly. That's a charming. You have a question? Go ahead. Ask your question. You guys can fire away with questions if you want. If I miss it because the chat's moving too quickly or something, I will definitely double back, or Halo will catch it for me and tell me. I cut it with cheese knife lightsaber. See, that actually works. I would say a cheese knife lightsaber. But yes. What if you don't read books? I mean, this isn't specifically about reading so much as it is about writing, crafting your own story. If you've got ideas and you want to tell a story and you want to put it out there for other people to read, these are the things that make your writing stronger and help maintain your immersion. Because the last thing you want, if you've got a really good idea, the last thing you want is to knock people out of your story because of a bad grammar mistake or some punctuation thing. And tragically, that will happen when people are reading critically. When you want the people who know this stuff, who know how to write, to be reading your things, they're going to see that stuff. Like, your best friend who's reading it for you for funsies might not catch those things, but editors will. And you don't want to give them more work than they need. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. And this also applies to things like resumes. There have been, and I'm guilty of this as well, plenty of cases in which resumes are tossed because of glaring spelling errors and things like that, especially if you're applying for a job that requires any sort of communication. And it's not difficult to have somebody look that stuff over, but it has to be somebody that knows what they're doing and knows what the rules are and knows how to spell stuff. And in this era of spell check and Grammarly and things like that, there's increasingly less justification to do it wrong, I guess is what I'm getting at. So, commas murdered you in your freshman year. If you also don't write. I mean, you don't have to take any of this advice. This is specifically for storytelling in a way that doesn't get fucked by the writing. Because when it comes to these storytelling and world building streams, the last one was a very, very general overview on structure of story, structure of world building, things like that. This one is specifically about the mechanics so that you don't accidentally screw up your story with something silly like punctuation. Because let's face it, you guys have some really, really good ideas. I know you do, because when we do these group writing things, or when I do the streams over on YouTube where people make suggestions for stories and stuff, you guys kill it. You really do. But a lot of it comes down to, can you tell the story in a way that isn't going to distract somebody who's reading critically? And that seems to be a hump that a lot of people struggle with. And I want to help with that. In the worst way, I want to help with that. Hey, smoking. It's all good. So many stories for D&D, so many regrets. Yeah, and we'll get to the D&D stuff later this month. We're going to be doing a stream specifically about D&D world building and storytelling. I'm going to have Lupus on for that because he has a shit ton of experience with D&D, both as a DM and world builder and also as a player. So he's going to be contributing to that. That's in a couple of weeks. So that'll be fun. So yeah, semicolons, don't be afraid of them. Again, also they can be used in a series if you are doing a series of things that are very large, many, many words, and also have commas inside. If I'm doing a series of stuff and I have something within the series that I want to set off with commas also, at that point I'm switching to the semicolon. In a pinch it will work. But yeah, just don't be afraid of semicolons, but also don't overuse them, because holy shit, there is a line there with being pretentious. Okay. Next, quotation marks. Okay, this is where I'm going to get specific about America. In America, Periods and commas always go inside the quotation marks. It's completely the opposite in places like the UK and Australia. So like here, people are baffled at the concept of putting any punctuation inside a quotation mark unless it is part of the quote, which I get to a point. But periods and commas, generally speaking, don't affect the flow of the dialogue, and that's why in the States, they go inside the quotes. You're not adding or subtracting anything from the quote itself. You're just adding the pauses and full stops that are needed at that point. Things like question marks and exclamation points, though, they only go inside the quotes when they are part of the quote. So if the person who is speaking is asking a question, then yes, that question mark goes inside the quote. If you are asking a question about somebody else's quote, and you are quoting them, but your question is not part of theirs, not part of their quote because you're asking about it, they were not, it goes outside the quotes. So really, it's kind of a simple rule for America. Periods and commas always inside the quotes, literally always, no exceptions. Please don't fuck with this, literally always. Question marks and exclamation points depends on whether it is part of the quote. Exactly, trifecta. Like this and not like this. Bingo. And again, this is absolutely American style. If you have a sentence inside of a sentence, same deal. Doesn't matter. In the United States, periods and commas go inside the quotes. You do not put them outside. If you see it that way, it was probably written by a British person or an Australian or something like that. Yeah, I had a global writers and it drives me nuts. Halo, I absolutely do not envy your job sometimes. Because holy shit, that would make me insane. And honestly, they also have an issue with quotes. Like in America, you use the double quotation marks to set off a quote. And if there's a quote within a quote, you use a single quotation mark inside of that double quotation mark. Here it's opposite of that, and it makes me batshit crazy. It's just, hey football. I'm on a rant about punctuation. And smoking with a goober redeem. Yeah, let's take a pause. Do a goober for smoking, because smoking is a magnificent goober. And also take a hydrate so I don't get too off on a tangent. And King J with the goober redeem. King J, I hope you are feeling better. I promise I won't take any of your youthful energy today, goober. No matter how tempted I become. And I am occasionally tempted. All right, so quotes. And again, this is a very American thing, and it's also one of those things that I don't think most people necessarily give two shits about, whether a period or a comma is inside or outside the quotes as they're reading, but it bugs me. And it would bug an editor, like Halo, to see that and be like, fuck it, like move that shit back into the quotes, please. I beg you. Is there a limit to how many exclamation points you use before you get banned? Hang on. Okay, I like exclamation points in a conversational setting. I don't like them in print. And this gets back to my journalism background. Exclamation points are seen as kind of cheap, and, tabloids use them. I mean, I was taught never to use any punctuation in headlines, full stop, but especially not exclamation points. And kind of cringe, bro. I feel like if something has the power to have the impact that it would have, that you would want it to have, like, you wouldn't need the exclamation point. Like, write it stronger. Unless, again, it's part of a quote. If somebody's exclaiming something, then sure, stick that exclamation point inside the quotes. It's part of their quote. They are exclaiming it. Boom. Done. But, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of exclamation points. And the more you line them up, the less credible I see you, generally speaking. And again, I will use them in tweets. I will use them in DMs. I have fun with them like that. But I also realize that they sometimes make me come across as a golden retriever. And that's by design. That's what they're for. But are you buying clothes at the soup store? Yeah. See, halo almost always takes them out. There's almost never a need for them. There's almost never a reason for them. They cheapen your writing. They make you seem tabloidy. They make you seem like you have to use them to convey your point instead of, writing better. 3 exclamation points are ideal. And here we have a Brit troll weighing in. Hi, Sit. Before anybody takes any advice Sit gives, let me share that Sit's idea of having a good time in Minecraft is to bury TNT under people's floors. So keep that in mind. The requirement if someone's yelling or loud. Well, yeah, of course. Again, in a quote, if somebody is exclaiming, you use your exclamation points. It's a punctuation mark. It has a purpose. It exists for a reason. But it is one that is almost never used in a professional context. And it doesn't add a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. It's one of those very strong flavors that you add very, very sparingly. If you lean heavy on exclamation marks, try to train yourself out of that if you're trying to write professionally. That's the biggest thing. Even in, like, if you're reading like a fantasy story or something and somebody's losing their shit and they're exclaiming, even then you don't want to end every sentence with an exclamation point. Like that's just too much. You have to be careful. And one of the hardest things to do is read your stuff as though you didn't write it, as though someone else wrote it. Like, you almost can't do that unless you stick it in a drawer for a really long time and then come back to it. So 9 out of 10 people agree that it's funny to bury TNT. Yeah, and welcome, dreams. All right, let's move on because we're already half an hour into this thing. Apostrophes. Okay, all right. I saved this one for last on the punctuation because this is my biggest pet peeve ever in punctuation. Everybody fucking settle in because this one's important. There are 2 times to use apostrophes. 2. One is possessives and one is contractions. That's all. That is all. And I'm not talking about single quotes. That's a different thing. Apostrophes. You never ever use them for plurals. You don't say, this store has cats and dogs, and stick an apostrophe between the T and the S of cats. I will find you if you do that. Accent marks are not apostrophes. That's different. Totally different punctuation mark. And in case nobody's sure, please enjoy Angry Flower. I'm sure some of you guys have seen this. If you haven't, you should definitely follow Angry Flower. Bob's Quick Guide to the Apostrophe. You idiots. Please. This is not one that has exceptions. I realize a lot of American grammar and punctuation have exceptions. It gets very confusing. There's like 8 different ways to pronounce the letters O-U-G-H in a line. I get it. This is not one of those times. There is literally just the 2 things for apostrophes. This is wrong. We do not pluralize things with an apostrophe literally ever. We do not make anything plural with an apostrophe ever, and you also can't put them wherever you want. Please, I am begging you, nothing fucks with my immersion more than a shitty apostrophe. When in doubt, maybe don't use it, because I feel like people will err on the side of sticking it in there, which is the weirdest choice. Lupuses, that's a possessive. I just said there's two times you use it, see? Contractions and possessives, not plurals. Lupuses is possessive, and because it is a proper name, like Jesus. No, it's not, actually. Muffed. It's not that. It is apostrophe S because it is a proper name. You don't just stick the apostrophe, because lupus himself is not plural. It's not a contraction. Possessive is not a contraction. Possessive is ownership. A contraction is 2 words pushed together to make a single word. That is what a contraction is. Everyone's teaching it wrong. That, when it's a proper noun that ends in an S, that is one of those cases where it can be either way, but the example they always give is Jesus. Jesus's. Like, for some reason, I guess because everybody knows who Jesus is, but like, they always use that example of a proper noun that ends in an S and has ownership of something, that in that case you can use the apostrophe S because it's not a plural. Apostrophe at the end of a letter of a word that ends in S is like, if it's a plural, then yeah, you just tack the apostrophe on. That's literally, they don't have an example on here, but you know what I mean. Plural possessive is just like the cat's shoes, but you have more than one cat. So cat's apostrophe shoes. The cats as a group own the shoes. Yeah, like Halo says, it's lenient, but copy editors do remember. Yeah. And Alan, it would not be Simpsons with an apostrophe S because there's not just the one Simpson. God, apostrophes are painful and I don't know why. Yeah, sandwich, cat's shoes like that means you have more than one cat and they have shoes. So plural of cats, more than one cat, because plural means more than one. And then they as a group, the cats own some shoes. Their ownership is the apostrophe. If it's a singular possessive, it'd be Simpsons. But the fact that you're using Simpsons is confusing because other people were using Simpsons as the TV show above, which is a plural. Simpsons as the TV show is a plural proper noun. So by doing what you're doing right now, it's confusing people because you're sticking an apostrophe in the middle of a plural. You've created a singular possessive. Simpson, the guy Simpson, owns something. That is Simpson's tree or Simpson's car. But no, the name of the show is The Simpsons. The plural, there's more than one person in this family of Simpson. So they are The Simpsons. When you plural something, it is not an apostrophe. The show The Simpsons is describing the family The Simpsons. It's not talking about them owning anything, and it's not talking about a contraction. It is literally the plural of someone's last name. The Smiths, the Martins, the whatever. If you have a single person and then you have their whole family, it's just plural. There's more than one Simpson on the show. Therefore, they are The Simpsons. Makes sense? Yes, Bart Simpsons would be fine. If you're talking about something that Bart Simpson owns, he is just the one Simpson. But what I was saying, you said the name of the show was Simpsons and you tried to stick an apostrophe in there. That is not the case. The name of the show is The Simpsons because we were just talking about a plural of some people. A plural of a last name. Everybody on the show that lives in that house is a Simpson. Therefore, they are The Simpsons. Okay, if you're meaning as an individual Simpson, you got to be clear. If you're going to ask questions like that in the chat, because people were literally using Simpsons for the plural possessive, the proper noun plural possessive, and you went in there and said, Simpsons apostrophe S, that's the name of the show. That's literally what you said if you scroll up. And no, it is not. The name of the show is The Simpsons, no apostrophe because it is plural. If you are speaking of a singular Simpson and what they own, then yes, apostrophe S. That would be the case to use that. Bart Simpson's shoes. Maggie Simpson's pacifier. Whatever. Yes, in that case, it is an apostrophe S because it is ownership every time. Ownership includes an apostrophe. Contractions include an apostrophe. Those are the only times to use them. Are we clear now? S apostrophe S feels so wrong. I mean, once you kind of jive with the whole, it's a proper noun, it's a person. Like, in my head, it sounds wrong to say Lupus shoes. It's Lupus's shoes. They're his shoes. Lupus, his full name, and then the actual ownership part, the apostrophe S. It almost feels like I'm taking away a syllable. Well, I am taking away a syllable, but it feels like I'm taking away part of his name to say Lupus shoes. It's weird. You'd pronounce it that way too, but not spell it. Ah, I see. I see what you're getting at. All right, so anyway, Angry Flower, definitely check it out. Highly recommend, but this is apostrophes. Again, there are not exceptions. It's a contraction or it's a possessive. It is one of those two. That is it. Please, if you ever use an apostrophe for plural, and once you start seeing this, you will see it everywhere. The number of professionally made signs that businesses put up that have an apostrophe S for a plural is fucking mind-boggling. I don't know why people do this. You were never taught this. You were never, ever, ever, ever taught to use apostrophe S for a plural, and yet people just sort of go, I think this needs an apostrophe. It doesn't. It doesn't. It does not. Something like kings is you could use king. Yeah, you could absolutely do that. If a proper name ends in an S and it's a possessive, you can do that, yes. The grammar is why flowy is made in, maybe. I didn't play Undertale, so I don't know. Okay, now that I've had my proper apostrophe rant, please, if you internalize nothing else, internalize the apostrophe rules. Please, 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 please. Because there's just no excuse. There's no excuse. It'd be one thing if they were teaching it one way and then they changed the rules. They didn't. That's it. All right, now we're going to decompress a little bit. How about we talk about adverbs? Everybody's least favorite part of speech. And I mean that with much love. I love adverbs. And it's one of those things that that people, I feel like people kind of forget adverbs exist, honestly. Which is a shame, because if you learn to use them properly, they can be a lot of fun. So adverbs. Basic rule about adverbs. Actually, hold on, let me back up and make sure everybody knows what the parts of speech are. So, you know what a noun is, right? Person, place, or thing, a noun. You know what a verb is, right? The action word, the thing that the person, place, or thing is doing or having done to it, right? Okay. Adjective, you guys know what that is. That is a description of the thing, a modifier for the thing. So like a red house, a wet noodle, a tall tree. The modifier is the adjective. With me so far? Okay. An adverb modifies verbs, adjectives, and also other adverbs sometimes. A great quick and dirty way to spot an adverb, and it doesn't work for all of them, but if you're in a pinch, look for the ly. Badly, swiftly, carefully. Those are adverbs. Very is also an adverb, but I hate very, and we'll get to that. All right, so that's basically what it comes down to. Adverbs will modify most of the time verbs, let's be honest, which is a good way to remember it. So if you're talking about how somebody is sneaking through the woods, if they're sneaking carefully, if they're sneaking quietly, those descriptors of how they are sneaking, because the sneaking is the action, those are the adverbs. Quietly and carefully are your adverbs. The fun thing about adverbs is they absolutely will punch your writing up. If you go back into something you've written, if you've written like a short story or something, go back in and add some adverbs. It will almost always make your writing stronger. Because people need descriptions, not just of what they're looking at, but also of what's happening action-wise. Like people like to have that extra bit to sort of describe what's going on, give them a better picture. And people forget to modify their verbs a lot. Like people will lean hard on adjectives and describe these beautiful sweeping vistas, and the sun looked like this and the clouds look like this. That's great. Awesome. You set a beautiful tone. Now apply that sort of vigorous, enthusiastic description to your actions as well. That's a really solid way to punch everything up. You thought those were adjectives? No, the adverbs are the ones modifying the verbs. Adjectives only modify objects, people, places, and things. They only modify nouns. That's all adjectives do. They are descriptors for nouns. My amber-hued orb-like, moist, round, wide eyes. That is a lot of adjectives in one phrase. As you gingerly skip down the street. See? Gingerly is an adverb. You're describing the skip. And it adds a little something. When you think about it, somebody's skipping down the street, you might get a mental picture of what that looks like. But you add that word gingerly, and suddenly you've got more of a picture. They're taking their time. They're being careful. Is there glass on the ground? Are there holes? Are they trying to avoid things? Are they not feeling well and they might fall over? You always viewed adjectives as being more concrete and adverbs. I could see why you'd think that, because verbs in general, I mean, they're an action, they're not a thing. So in a way, they're a little bit ephemeral, but they're so important. And adverbs, because they modify verbs, are so important. Like, what is happening is just as important as what you're looking at, or what you're holding, or what, whatever the object is in the scene. The description of the action can really carry your writing forward and really, really punch it up. It paints such a better picture when it's not just somebody walking. It's somebody walking furiously, or somebody walking, oh God, I'm completely blanking. But that's actually a good segue for me. Very. Where possible, try not to use the word very, because very is weak and lazy. Something is not very pretty, it is beautiful. Something is not very large, it is enormous. Yeah, adverbs are essential in storytelling. Yeah, and again, like anything, they can be overused. All of these things can be overused, because that's the flip side. People are told use more adverbs because it makes you sound like you know what you're talking about and it makes you a better writer, and they will just go in and adverb the shit out of stuff, and it's like, okay, now not that way. Like, hold up. So yeah, removing them extra adverbs. Every very with fuck, yeah. Honestly. But you don't need to go very. And there's a website called Lose the Very that Lupus actually turned me on to, and it's amazing because you can type in an adjective like beautiful or tall or ugly or whatever, and it will convert very beautiful into an SAT word for you, basically. It will produce a word for you that means that without you having to do it yourself. There's also obviously thesauruses and stuff like thesaurus.com and whatnot. Like, you can type in beautiful and get a million different words for it. That said, and again, we got to be careful with this. While this will help you vary your word choice, it is very obvious to me, very obvious, I used a very, it is crystal clear to me when somebody has gone hard on the thesaurus, because you're using words that probably aren't conversational to you or to most people, and your dedication to using a different word to say the same thing like 6 or 7 times is glaring. Please don't do that. Speaking of things that are distracting. Like, we get it, you know how to use a thesaurus. Word choice is important, and we will absolutely get to that. But like, again, with sparing, use these things in moderation. You can say very. You can use very on occasion. There's a place for it. Sometimes the adjective that you're trying to modify doesn't really have a synonym that punches it up. Like, sometimes the very is the best choice. But most of the time there's a better word to use there. And bonus points if it's a word that people actually do use in this day and age. Okay. Where was I? I love that site. Me too. Stretch. Vary the very. Exactly. I like that. And yeah, using words you're not familiar with is absolutely a minefield. Like, you do have to be careful about that, because that will fuck you up. English, and again, don't get me wrong, English is a bitch. There are so many rules. There are so many weird pronunciations. Things double back on themselves. We draw so many words from so many different cultures and so many different languages that at this point it makes absolutely no goddamn sense. And I am impressed as hell with anybody that learns English as a second language, because I wouldn't want to do it. I take one look at English and go, psh. I mean, we have native English speakers who can barely handle it. It's a pain. So, yeah. How do you flex those rules when you're writing for characters that may have poor grammar? Again, same rule applies. When you're within quotes, when you're writing, if characters are speaking and they have shitty grammar, you can play with that. Like, you can absolutely, if this person doesn't know many words, they can use very, sure. Because again, you're painting a picture of your characters with their dialogue. This is a show, not tell moment. You can help establish who they are as people, as characters, through how they speak. And if they don't know a lot of words, if they're not very educated, you can also spell things phonetically to convey that they can't pronounce things quite properly. Just be very careful doing that you don't veer into some problematic territory. Looking at you, Jar Jar Binks. But yeah, you can absolutely, when it's dialogue, the rules are very, 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 very soft because it's dialogue. Don't worry, Czech is even worse. Oh, God. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Boy, Halo, I hope you're having fun and this isn't triggering a whole bunch of shit for you. All right, where was I? Adverbs. Okay. We went over what they are modifiers, how to use them, and losing the very. Yeah, we hit all of those things. And I didn't have a picture of adverbs, so I took one of my screenshots of Final Fantasy. Please enjoy the sunset. You guys are awesome, and I appreciate you. A grammar checker. Yeah, I'm there for it. All right, moving on, now that we are like an hour into this thing. Hey, thank you for the follow. Welcome. For this one, you just get to look at my little friend Steve, who is currently hiding in the house. I know where he is. All right, let's talk about word choice. Showing versus telling. We just talked about that a little bit, but let's reiterate. Adverbs are a great way to show, not tell, because you are describing actions. You are avoiding the very where possible. You are finding ways to paint a picture and describe not just the things in the scene, but the things happening in the scene. All of that contributes to showing, not telling. And you definitely need to do that. Please, for the love of God, don't spend 4 or 5 pages describing a scene. 9 times out of 10, it doesn't even matter. And I hate this, but this gets me. People get very, as writers, very attached to their scenes. They can see it. As you're sitting there and writing, you can see this thing playing out in your head. You can see every detail of the room, the field, the mountain, the tavern, wherever this is happening. You can smell it. It's tactile to you. You are absolutely immersed in it yourself. This is your world. You have created this. And it can be so easy to just want to describe every bit of it to your reader and be like, and over here there's this, and over here there's this, and this is happening over here, and this is... Most of that probably will not factor into your plot or your action or anything else that's happening. It's just there as set dressing, and you really like it because you came up with it, and it is your world, and that's cool. But if it's not actively contributing to the story, to the movement, the flow, the plot, the action, you have to resist the urge to do that. Like, you can spend a few paragraphs kind of setting the tone, describing a little bit of the background stuff, blah, blah. But if you're going into, if you're waxing poetic about this table of people in the corner doing blah, 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 and those people are not going to matter later, they have nothing at all to do with your story, then that's just a pointless misdirect. That's a waste of time. People are going to, like, think you're planting something with that, and then there's never any payoff because you're just doing it to do it. You're not doing it because you're motivated. So... yeah, readers do have imaginations. They can fill in the gaps. And that is a big reason why, for a lot of my audios, I don't spend a lot of time on description because I trust you guys. I trust that when you're listening to the audio, you're filling in those gaps. You're imagining what you think suits best there. And your perspective frames what you're seeing. All of us have a lens that we see things through. We frame everything through our own personal lens. And that's how it should be. And you have to give people credit to do that. You have to give them, like, space to do that. Struggle with over description. Yeah, over description is it's a trap. It's a pitfall. The gun specifically is, oh, the gun, Chekhov's gun. The gun specifically for Chekhov. That gun? Yeah. Just make everything relevant to the plot. Oh God. Kill me. But yeah, it's like we talked about before a little bit in the last stream with Chekhov's gun and things like that. You just have to know when not to get real excited about your own stuff, basically, which again, super difficult because this is your stuff and you made it and you invented it and it's important to you and you want to share it. That's cool, but you have to be able to not do that. And God, I know that's hard. I know it's hard. There's so much that I wish that I could just like describe, the things that you see or whatever. It's just, but you can't because it's just filler. And you even get to the point where you're reading stories and you know which areas to skip because you know it's filler and none of this is going to matter. And it's like, bleh. That's not fun to read. Is it ever a good idea to have Chekhov's gun deliberately misfire? Of course. Absolutely. If you want to set up, a planting of something like Chekhov's gun and have it be a twist, have it be something else, you can absolutely do that. And I'll give you an example drawn from my own stuff. And spoiler alert if you guys haven't listened to this audio yet, but it's been out for a couple of years, so you're on your own. The audios that I do, the first audio that I did with the listener is a werewolf, and my character is not. And I spend most of that audio leading the listener to believe, or leading you, the listener, not the listener in the story, to believe that I don't know that the listener is a werewolf. There's a lot of, are you okay? You're acting kind of weird kind of stuff. Until the very end. So the setup is that, oh God, my character's going to find out that this person's a werewolf. My character might get eaten. Like that's basically a horror setup. What's going to happen? And at the very end, you find out that not only did I know all along, but my biggest concern is that you don't get hair on the on the couch. You don't get your fur on the couch. And then it completely misfires. That is a complete misfire of the setup. But it's a twist in a good way. It's not at all what you thought was coming, but it still works. So I take all of that setup and I turn it completely on its head and everything's fine. So yes, that does work, but you have to do it. It's not just a red herring. Red herrings are distracting. They're misdirects, but they don't circle back around to the main payoff usually. They're there to distract. They're there to make you think one thing, but then they don't necessarily have anything to do with the twist or to the actual outcome. They can, but red herrings by definition are just sort of, hey, look over there, and it's nothing. There's nothing there. That audio threw you off. Yeah, it's a fun one because, again, I mean, you guys know I like twists, but you spend a lot of time setting something up. That doesn't mean you necessarily have to do the payoff exactly that way, but as long as you justify it in universe. Again, if I'd handled that differently and it didn't make sense, then it would have been like, well, why was it set up that way if it didn't, And it just turns out to be this nice, charming little moment between this couple, except she doesn't want to have to vacuum the couch later. So, yeah, very chill. Nobody's face got ripped off. And in a way, it's a little anticlimactic to do that because you're expecting the worst. You're expecting terrible things to happen. Or at least this big, oh my God, I had no idea you were a wolf kind of thing. Nope, not a thing. But again, in my mind, it tracks with the logic because a lot of times these things do logically track. If you have a significant other who's a werewolf and you live with them, what the fuck are the odds that they can hide that from you? Probably zero. Definitely approaching zero. So apply logic, what would actually be happening in this scene? And then go with that. But then again, with the showing versus telling, it's not, my character never said, wow, you're acting suspiciously like a wolf. It's more like, wow, you're really into the steaks I'm cooking tonight, huh? I've never seen you put your nose so close to the frying pan before. Those descriptions are showing, you can see what the listener's doing in that scene. You can picture it. You can picture somebody sort of drooling over this, steak in a pan and getting weirdly close to it. And that's strange. you know? Regularly turning into an 8-foot tall furry murder machine. Yeah, exactly. You can hide, like, certain habits, maybe a unicorn collection or something, but not that. Not if you live with the person. Living with a person gives you all kinds of perspective into their, like, inner workings, and yeah, it just didn't make sense to me to make that a thing. So it's funner to twist that. But sure, absolutely, you can always twist things as long as it makes sense, as long as you can justify it. Okay, word choice. And how bigger is not always better. This gets back to the thesaurus thing from before. It's painful to me when I read things where people have just tried so hard to use the biggest words they can, the most complicated words they can. It comes across as clunky and non-conversational and sometimes insufferable. And I even see it in, like, I read a lot of, like, memoirs of, like, celebrities and stuff like that. I like reading about just, like, each chapter tends to be like an individual story that somebody has. Like, this one time when I was 6 and I had to do blah, 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 whatever. I like that. But even some of the smarter celebrities I know, people that really should know better, are guilty of this. And I'll be sitting there reading it like, why? Why are they writing it like this? This really should be... It's like they're writing a master's thesis instead of just a story about something they experienced. And again, conversational doesn't have to mean lazy and sloppy in punctuation and grammar. You can make something conversational and relatable and engaging and still follow the rules. Like, in fact, you should do that most of the time, unless you're writing a master's thesis. But I think that it makes people think they sound smarter or better writers, but no, that's not the case. It just sounds like you got your mitts on a thesaurus and you know how to look things up. And it's distracting. Two worlds collide. Your mother tongue. Oh, that's true. But I'm not talking about, like, necessarily big with letters. I'm talking about big, like, could trip you up in a spelling bee kind of thing. Aqua. I love that, Aqua. Wow, you are acting very wolf-like right now with how much you are salivating over this steak. That's very interesting. It's almost as if I can see your tail wagging at it, but that would be silly, as you're a human and do not have a tail. After all, it'd only be the case that you would have a tail if you were something strange, like a werewolf, wouldn't it? But that'd be silly because you're not a werewolf, and I wouldn't even consider that to be a possibility without proof, which I don't. Don't stick gum under your desks. Ew. Gross. You know the janitorial staff has to clean that up later. Unfair. Yeah, in German there are no small words. That is correct. From what I know of German, that is definitely true. But yeah, all right. So if you're not sure about your word choice, if you're writing something and you really want to lean hard into those big words and stuff, run it by people. You should always have at least one or two people that you trust to read your stuff before anybody else sees it. And I realize that asking somebody to read something sometimes has the same vibe as asking them to help you move. It's kind of a big ask. Like, it's time consuming to read things. And especially if you're reading with a critical eye, looking for problems, looking for notes. And when people ask me to read stuff, I will usually respond with, do you want me to just read this for general ideas? Like what I think of the story, like the big picture stuff? Or do you want me to red pen this? Because that's a different read. I can do one or the other, but it's almost impossible to do both in one pass. If you want both, it's going to take 2 reads. Because those are very, very, very different things. And almost always they kind of backpedal and go, oh no, just big picture. I don't want you to point out every single punctuation problem. And I don't blame them. But again, it can ruin my immersion and ruin my view of the big picture if I can't read the damn thing because it's the punctuation and grammar are all over the place, So those things do matter. And this is all kind of circling back to the same thing. You choose red pen, you want to learn. And even with red pen, there are levels to how hard I will go into stuff. Like if you want the absolute nitpickiest treatment, I can do that. But holy shit, will that be a sea of red? And go hard on me. Yeah, one of my professors in college, like his method was to take whatever documents you sent him, like you send him an article or something you wrote in Google Docs, and he would make all of his notes back in line, but in all caps. So you'd get back your document, you open your document after he's done with it, and there's a million notes that are all like literally shoved in between your words in all caps. And those are his corrections. And it's like, oh my God, like as you're reading your own work back to yourself, there's all these little sections that are screaming at you because you fucked up. And it's a lot. Yeah, it worked. I got better. Yeah, red pen does trigger fight or flight. I've known some teacher friends who actually will only use like green pens and stuff to grade now because red is such a triggering color for some people. Yeah, printing stuff out and going over it with a pen helps, but 100% of the time you cannot be your own editor. And I say that with much love. I say that as somebody who doesn't do drafts. I don't do drafts. Anytime when I was in school and the teacher would be like, okay, we need a first draft and then we need a final draft, I didn't know what the fuck that meant. I just wrote it the first time the way I wanted it to be. And I would lose points for not changing anything from the first draft to the final draft. But honestly, I didn't see the fucking point. Write it the right way the first time. That said, I also understand that you cannot be your own editor. You will miss things because you are reading this through your own lens. You're reading this through the perspective of the person who wrote it. You know what you meant. Other people do not know what you meant. And so much of the editing process, if you are an author, is getting stuff to a point where other people can understand it, even if you think it's the clearest goddamn thing in the whole world. Even if you like, what's wrong with this? Why can't you understand this? I wrote it so clearly. Nope. Like, you will feel like you're dumbing your shit down, but you have to make sure that everybody can understand it, and you are going in with this knowledge level that is so high above everybody else because you wrote it. So edit and suggest mode in docs. Oh, that's good. That's the nice way to do it. Write it right the first time. Yeah. That tends to be my MO. I'm spiraling again a little bit. Yeah. But I get very frustrated when people think, oh, I've got this. I don't need anybody to read it over. It's good. God, no. I don't care if you're fucking Tolkien. Have people read your shit. Have people make notes. Have people ask questions. Have people clarify. Like, you cannot do this without other eyeballs. And that's just how it is. Like, I'm sorry, but that's just how it is. You cannot write in a vacuum and expect people to understand it in the spirit that you wrote it, or to get the same experience out of it that you think they should get. It's not going to happen. You have to have an editor. I think it sucks so much you don't want to show it to anyone ever. Yeah, that's difficult too. Like, a lot of the things I've written I've never shown anybody, or I just think, whatever, it's not a big deal. In my case, a lot of times that's because I don't intend to do anything with it. Like, if I start a story, I get a chapter or two in, I'm not going to waste somebody's time reading it because I don't probably plan to finish it. Like, I might, but probably not. Just send back a draft copy of the Silmarillion. I read the Silmarillion, and holy shit, was that a slog. I mean, you can feel the love. You can feel how much he loves his world, but, fuck. That thing is a bear. Yeah, TLDR. We're not paying you by the word here, Tolkien. Actually, looking at you, Dickens. Fucking paid by the word. Over flowery, descriptive motherfucker. Son of a bitch. Anyway, all this to say, please do not be a thesaurus with your books. It's okay to talk like people talk. Nim swears? Oh my God, do I? All right, writing with movement and action. This is another one that's going to come down to your word choices, and this actually feeds back into the adverbs a little bit. Look at me bringing stuff full circle. Hydrate, thank you. Okay, so when you're reading something, if you're reading it, not something you've written, but just a story, it's like a fantasy story, a sci-fi story, whatever. 5 bits in the swear jar. Thank you, Aqua. Not the adverbs again. No, this is just an example. It circles back. But the point, this is the overarching point of writing with movement and action. When you're reading something, the more interesting things are the things where stuff is happening. It's not just a description of a scene. It's not just some flat dialogue. Stuff's happening. There's movement, there's motion, there's action, there's forward progress. Sometimes that can be propelled by dialogue. Frequently it can be propelled by dialogue. Sometimes it's propelled by what people are doing in a scene. You get the idea. But try to make things flow. Try to give your story some movement. If you catch yourself just spending paragraphs describing something, or paragraphs setting up a description for something, or paragraphs of dialogue where people are just going back and forth describing, oh, well, I need to go to so-and-so's house. Okay, well, then I'll go to so-and-so's house. Okay, well, do you want to take the car? Should I take the car? I don't know, maybe you should take the car. I think I'll take an Uber, you take the car. Oh my God, fucking kill me. None of that is needed. It's dumb, unless you're literally using it to establish how boring these characters are. Which, yeah, they are, 100%. But try to keep things moving. Used to mess up tests because you never got the point. Getting the point, and I'm one of those people that's kind of on the fence about literary analysis for school age people. Like, university is one thing, but like, literary analysis is a real fuzzy, soft area where there's a lot of interpretation, again, with the personal lens. Everybody's going to read things through their personal lens, and what you read and how it resonates with you is going to vary a lot from how it resonates with somebody else. It doesn't mean the author doesn't have intent in some of the symbolism. Obviously, coding is a thing, intentional or not intentional. Symbolism is definitely a thing. Allegory, like, authors will write with intent, and a lot of times they're nice enough to leave notes behind that lets us know what their intent was. Sometimes, though, authors are just writing for money, or just writing to tell a story, or just writing because they're a shut-in who hasn't left their house in 40 years and they just want to do something. Like, whatever, that's cool. But, like, ascertaining authorial intent is a heavy burden to place on, like, an 8th grader, I guess is what I'm getting at. And I feel like we should be fixating a lot more on enjoyment of literature and what we like best about it, as opposed to breaking it down into why are the curtains blue. That's kind of where I stand on that. So getting the point, like, the point should be enjoying the literature. The point should be reading it, consuming it, processing it through your perspective, and then sharing that. Like, what did it mean to you? What did it make you feel? What did it make you think about? Was there anything that stuck with you? Were there any particular lines that stuck with you? All of that stuff, like, that should be what we're focused on. I give zero fucks what the author meant by the blue curtains, at least at that level. Maybe, if you're working, again, with the master's thesis. Okay, deconstruct the blue curtains to your fucking heart's content. Have a good time. But yeah, high school English is known for killing a love of reading. And that's really too bad, because we really should be celebrating anybody reading, especially at that age. Like, anybody. I had a class where, outside of our normal classwork where we were reading stuff together and analyzing shit together, we also had to read 1,000 pages a quarter off of a specific reading list that she had created, the teacher had created. But fortunately, there were enough books on this list that I was able to find stuff that I could at least mostly enjoy. So I was able to read, like, The Three Musketeers and Ivanhoe and Les Mis and stuff like that in the original novel forms, which didn't suck. These were things I already had some experience with, in pop culture, so I could go back and experience them that way. And that I kind of liked, having a list to choose from. I kind of liked being assigned a singular book that the whole class had to read and then, analyze to death was less fun. Guys got to choose. Only for that, like, out of class reading part, which was still a lot. Like, reading 1,000 pages in 9 weeks on top of all the other schoolwork we had was a lot. But And then in class, we were doing like poetry analysis and shit like that, which, ugh, God. And I like poetry. I like poetry a lot. But speaking of things that can be analyzed absolutely to death, and poetry is, even worse sometimes than prose because it is written deliberately symbolic. Poetry is brevity of words. Well, not if you're Whitman, but in general, it's brevity, and it's so much showing and so little telling sometimes, which is nice to a point. But yeah, if you go read good poetry, the showing versus telling aspect is significant, and that's one thing I really like about poetry, how they can paint a picture with just a few words, just a few action words about like, salt air blowing through hair kind of thing. And like, what that's like. You've experienced that. You know what it smells like, what it feels like. Whitman is a classic. I do like Whitman. And I mean, you guys know I like Whitman all the way back in like the coma patient audio. I read Whitman to the coma patient. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Whitman. I'm a big fan of Ogden Nash. If you aren't familiar with Ogden Nash, a little bit absurdist, but fun. And I'm not going to go into my favorite poems because holy shit, that's another rabbit hole I could definitely go down. The main character just scarfed down that bread, just gobbled it up. This book is made lesser for the lack of words in the English language for how quickly this main character ate that white sliced bread. Aqua, you painted a picture. Well done, you. I liked my high school literature class. It was half book club and half film study. Yeah, something similar to that. I mean, we occasionally would watch the movie of whatever book we were reading in English classes and stuff. But in my senior year, I took a theater lit class, which was basically that. It was reading plays, performing clips of the plays, and watching the movies of the plays, which was a nice way to experience it on several levels. And I really, really enjoyed that. Okay. So writing with movement and action. Please, if you find yourself in one place too long in your story, move that shit along. Do it. You like books, you don't have to ask whether the non-existent music is diegetic or not. I mean, that's true, unless you play some lo-fi beats to read your book to. But, I mean, in general, I just kind of assume all music is non-diegetic unless they tell me otherwise. Let's face it, like, we don't have a soundtrack to our lives. Super comfy, yeah. I mean, depending on the book you're reading. If you're reading, like, anything by Stephen King, I don't recommend lo-fi beats to read about murder to. That's a weird choice. Okay, and we're going to dip back just a little bit into the last stream where we talked a bit about character actions and dialogue. Writing believable dialogue. This is a place where you can have fun with it, but again, you can go too far with it. So one example before we even get into what is said is when you're talking about when people are talking back and forth to each other. And it's like, Bob said, blah, 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 blah. Tom said, blah, 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 blah. Bob said. It doesn't always have to be said. If someone's asking a question, they can be Bob asked, Bob queried, Bob inquired. If there's a response, Tom responded, Tom answered. Things like that. You can do that. Those things are not that distracting. Generally speaking, we gloss over the saids and the questions and stuff like that, but it's still there. Subconsciously, it's still there. If you use the same thing every time, the repetition, the pattern does sort of ingrain itself in our brain, and vice versa. If you don't use the same thing every time, the variety is there. So it's there. It's subtle, but it's there. And then you can things like exclaimed. Bob exclaimed. Bob shouted. Bob posited. He's making some guess. Bob cried, which of course means yelling also. Kevin MacLeod while reading The Shining, honestly. Going to talk about adverbs there? Yeah, I mean, we talked about adverbs with movement. Like this is more of this word choice thing is more of an overview that's trying to like bring everything together to what we were talking about before. We talked kind of at length before about how adverbs modify verbs and how that contributes to the movement of a scene, how it contributes to, clarifies. Again, because you want to paint a picture. You want to bring people into this universe that you have created, the story that you've created. And the way to do that is not to beat them over the head with 6 pages of description. The way to do that is to take them along with you on this little journey. Give them just enough description so they can start building stuff in their imaginations, and then focus on movement, action, driving forces, dialogue, things that engage, things that paint the picture, things that propel your narrative. Said softly. Oh, I see what you're getting at. I hadn't even gotten to that yet. I was just working on specifically the action word of the dialogue. Said, responded, cried, blah, blah, blah. And yes, then from there you can start adding in adverbs. But, this is a big but. This is one of those places that adverbs do get overused, is when they are describing a piece of dialogue. Said softly, said loudly, said quietly, said whatever. If you use an adverb every single time someone speaks in that context, that is distracting as fuck. Don't do it. This is a big but, yes. And I am one of adverbs' biggest fans. I will use them whenever possible, if it makes sense. But do not, if you're writing dialogue, especially if you're writing like pages of dialogue, if this is one of those times where people are having a big conversation, maybe there's a lot of people talking, this is important to the plot, this is plot points that are being laid out, this is action steps that are being laid out, this is emotional catharsis, whatever's happening, do not modify every line of dialogue with an adverb. I fucking beg you. Please. Because that will get old. Doing it, again, gently, lightly, like a delicate seasoning here and there. Adverbs are great for describing motion, describing movement, describing actions that are doing things. But when it comes to dialogue, you want people to focus more on what's being said. And you can convey some of that with, again, Bob shouted. You don't have to say shouted loudly. Shouted has the loudly built in. Like, that's a wasted word. Don't bother modifying something that's already descriptive enough. Because shouted is a step up from said. Bob said loudly, or Bob shouted. Shouted is better. So keep that in mind. Like, sometimes the adverb is really not that necessary. If you're picking good action words for your dialogue that are plenty descriptive on their own, they tell the story on they direct people's attention where it belongs, which is what is being said, but also the tone it's being said in. That's it. That's all you need. You don't have to go that hard on the adverbs in dialogue. They do help occasionally. Said softly and whispered. Tom said softly or Tom whispered. Both good. And honestly, they do convey a slightly different vibe, but you don't want to say whispered softly. Again, the softly is implied in the whispered. In that context, I would use said softly if I was conveying more of a mood thing. Said softly to me is somebody who is in a particular headspace, like a quiet, pensive, maybe preoccupied headspace. Whispered could be anything from trying really hard to be quiet because the aliens are in the next room, to trying not to wake up the baby, to pensive, thoughtful headspace. So, yeah, but whispered quietly, no. Whispered has the quietly part implied. And this is one of those places where sometimes the best word choice is to take one out. Just err on the side of fewer words. And that honestly is a good rule in general. Brevity is a good rule in general. I like description. Don't get me wrong. I like motivated description. I like things that paint a picture. I don't like wasted words. And I don't like when people spend so much time explaining something or describing something or modifying their action that it just kind of gets lost in the weeds. Sometimes Well, and this is one of those times where my journalism background actually really helped, because you frequently don't have a lot of space to work with if you're working specifically for print journalism, or if you're writing, a script for a broadcast and you've only got 30 seconds to do it. You learn very quickly how to fit the important things in as tightly as possible and still tell a decent story. And obviously journalism writing is not meant to be creative. It's not meant to be flowery. Straight like journalism, not like the interesting stuff like Vanity Fair, Rolling Stone, or what Hala gets to do. But if you're just getting the facts out there, like, you learn very quickly how to do it in as few words as possible. Chris with the Goober Redeem, Goober of the Frozen North. I appreciate you being here for this. And it's a Maple, another Frozen Norther. What did you miss while you were at work? Oh, let's see. We did some punctuation. We did some adverbs. Now we're on to word choices and the importance of that. Mostly just me rambling about shit that really pisses me off about things like apostrophes. So yeah, that's what you've missed. If you can consider it missed. All right, so, and again, a lot of this will get back to making sure that other people read your shit. Please let other people read your shit. Editors. And trust what they have to say. This is really, really hard. But if you let your trusted friends read your shit, and these are people that read the kind of stuff that you're trying to do, or they like the kind of stuff that you like, maybe they read the same fantasy books you do or whatever, trust that when they have notes for you that they mean well, that they're trying to help, that they're trying to make your writing stronger, and fucking listen to them. What about writing in all caps, Maple? That means Maple's yelling at us! Ah! Which is another way to convey shouting in dialogue, but you guys knew that. But in that point, you wouldn't have to say Maple shouted. It would just be that line of dialogue set off with quotes. And the exclamation point would go inside the quotes because it's part of the exclamation. He's happy to a rather excessive degree. Oh no! The Maple happiness volcano eruptee. So yeah, trust your friends, trust your editors. Nobody is trying to fuck with you. Nobody is trying to ruin your writing or make you have a bad day. They're trying to make you better. If somebody is nice enough to read your writing, because again, that's a big ask. You're basically asking somebody to give up sometimes hours of their time to read something that you created. They get nothing out of this. They're just doing it because they're your friend and they like you. If someone's willing to do that, trust that they are not here to fuck with you. They're not trying to ruin your whole life. They're trying to make you a better writer. They might have legitimate questions about your writing. And this is something that my Olympian patrons get very frustrated with me about, and rightly so, I think, but I don't have any other process. Every month when I do my half-an-hour calls with my Olympian patrons, we do those one-on-one, and they come to me and they say, okay, here's an idea I have for an audio. And if it's like a fantasy or an epic or anything like that, I will start asking questions. And my questions are always to do with world building, motivations, things like that. Okay, well, why do you think this is happening? Well, why is this person like this? What are they doing? What's the point of this? What's the point of that? And I realize I can get really annoying with that. But the thing is, a lot of times, like, they think they've got a fully formed idea, but all it takes is somebody else who hasn't heard this idea before to hear it and start going, okay, wait, I have questions. And start pointing out some of the either holes or weak spots or places that need to be a little more fleshed out in order to create a complete story or a complete world. And these are things I need for writing. If I'm going to write a script based on an idea, I need to know what people's motivations are. I need to know some background. I need to know, what the action is going on, like this, and this. I need to know what this person feels about this person. You can't just say magical shoes that, but like, where do they come from? Who enchanted them? Why are they magic? Is the whole world magic or just the shoes? How did this person get a hold of them? Like, these are all things that I need to know in order to craft the story. And these are things that the reader would want to know if this was a story they were reading. If you're reading a story about magic shoes, you fucking want to know where those things come from. And everything else you can possibly learn about it. And again, you're not going to necessarily need every detail, but it helps to know them. As you are crafting the world, as you are crafting the story, all of that stuff interlinks. The motivations, the background, all of those things drive your plot and drive your conflict, which is the story. The conflict is the story. Remind me to poke you about helping nitpick the homebrew setting. Yeah, absolutely. You don't have much info about pocket read? Nope. And I decided to craft what I wanted to about that. You're welcome. All you guys said is you wanted pocket read. You gave me no further guidance, and I chose not to ask for any further guidance because I don't like to do things by committee. My channel, my story. You will get pocket read. You will not be mad. You'll like her. Don't worry. Give us more details about the shoes. Yeah, I mean, honestly. And again, depending on where you enter the story, you may not need all the background. You don't necessarily need to know who made the shoes or how they were enchanted or whatever. But you need to know how they work in the universe. You need to know why they matter in the universe. If the background is important, you do need to flesh it out. If you're counting on the characters in the story needing the background, if they need the background to solve the mystery or to make the shoes work or whatever, then yes, you do need that stuff. And ultimately, the main thing, again, the conflict. How are the shoes factoring into the conflict? Are they a main driving plot point? Are they Chekhov's gun? Are they a MacGuffin? Are they a misdirect? But if you introduce that shit, you better fucking do something with it. Do not plant and then not pay off. I will come for you. I hate it when those threads are left hanging. Fucking hate it. I mean, I've had audios where I've circled back to some loose threads 20 episodes later because I knew I was going to do that. And I had a plan. And people will be like, oh man, I forgot about that. It's like, I didn't. I was waiting. Request for comment. Yes, exactly. Committees are the worst way to do anything. They really are. Literally the worst. All right, so a lot of this comes down to lean hard on action and adverbs where you can. Please do not go for SAT words every time, please. And keep things moving. Make your dialogue matter. I mean, I'm not going to go hard on the dialogue because we talked about that last time, but the dialogue matters a lot. And you can tell so much of your story. You can show so much through your dialogue, not just what's being said, but how they're saying it, how they're standing when they say it, the expressions on their face while they're talking. These are the ways you paint a picture. You forgot about the parents. I didn't. Design by committee is the worst. All right. Yeah, and the last bit, trust your audience. This gets back to the whole let people imagine things. Give them the information they need. Give them the descriptions they need. Paint the picture that they require for the story, but do not bombard them with 6 pages of description of what the color of the wood is in the tavern and what the beer smells like. Let them imagine some stuff. That's the easiest way to insert people, honestly. You don't want to give them too much because then they just feel like they're pressing their faces against a window and boy, is it boring. Let people imagine. Trust that people can follow you, imply things, suggest things, leave things open-ended. You don't have to lay it all out there. And you guys know that I'm a big fan of this with my audios. I don't repeat questions back because I think that's stupid and it's lazy. And I also trust you guys to understand when I'm doing a one-sided audio, you can pick up on what the other character is saying, what your character is saying based on my responses. I trust you. I trust that you can follow this. You have to have some respect for your audience. You have to be able to trust them. All right, this one I just put one of my commissioned arts on here because I like it. All right, let's talk about some of my biggest pet peeves, and this is a non-comprehensive list, but any one of these things will instantly make you sound incredibly unprofessional. So we're just going to touch on the ones that personally bug me. There's one. Y'all know about this, right? Okay. Yeah, and again, non-comprehensive. This list could literally I could spend hours and hours and hours on this list. I'm not going to. I chose some of my favorite pet peeves for this slide. It's still a little long, but I tried I tried to control myself. I did. I tried, guys. I tried to rein myself in a little bit. All right, there, and there. We talked about apostrophes as contractions. That is what this is. This there is they are. That is the only time you use it. It means they are. The apostrophe is the key. That is your contraction. It's obviously not a possessive because there's no S, so that's a contraction. They are. This there is ownership. That is the possessive. Their car, their house. And this there is like directional. There is the house. You could say there is their house, they're not home. And use all three of them. You'll never understand this is a problem for people. I feel like it's one of those things that people learn and then they just don't spend the brain power retaining it. Like my brain prioritized this shit. I always loved writing. I was always a writer. But I had friends who just, like, once they learned it, they're like, meh. And it wasn't a priority for them. So, yeah, I don't get it. But please, if you use the wrong there, that is an instant catapult me out of the story and into this person doesn't know how to write. And again, I don't care how good your story is. If you do this wrong, editors will think, psh, you could even get the basic English right? Really? And again, yeah, autocorrect will not always catch these. And that's the other problem. People rely really hard on autocorrect, spell checks and stuff like that. Useful tools, but they also make you lazy. I have an ex who used to have a great sense of direction, like incredible sense of direction, until he started relying on his GPS more. Now the guy can't find his way out of a paper bag. He got lazy and his brain started to reprogram itself to not pay attention and to not look around. And now he's completely dependent on his GPS. Don't do that with autocorrect. Don't do that with spell checkers. Please, 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 please. Yeah, Halo's over here like, I don't even know if I want this person to write for me if they do this. Yeah. Oh, we'll get to its and its. 2, 2, and 2. Okay. I'm trying to think of like mnemonics or something to help you guys remember these, but there really isn't one. TWO is the number. Easy, easy. TOO is also, or in addition. I like that too. And TO is a preposition. Prepositions are when something is being acted upon. The prepositional phrase is what you're talking about. So you could say, I went to the park. The park is not the subject of that sentence, right? I am. I'm the one who went. I am the subject. The verb is went. To the park is the prepositional phrase. That's that is the thing that I am acting upon. To the park. From the park. Prepositions, there are many, many prepositions. About, above, across, after, against, along, among, around, at, before, behind, below, beneath, beside, besides, between, beyond, by, down, during, for, from, in, inside, into, like, near, of, off, on, onto, over, through, to, toward, under, underneath, up, until, in, within, without. Yeah, that's a bunch of them. Not exhaustive, but that's a bunch of them. All of those are prepositions. Like I made that one number 2. Guess how old I was when I memorized that. And yes, of course, I put it on here on number 2 on purpose. Jesus Christ, you guys. You give me no credit. I was not 2. I didn't start reading until I was 3. Okay. Anyway, prepositions. TO is the preposition. So when someone says, oh, I like that too, but they just do this one, I'm like, to what? You like it to what? I like it to run properly. I like it to shine brightly. I like it to feed me bacon. Ah! No, I was 13 when I memorized that list of prepositions. And I will never, ever forget it. I don't know why I will never forget it. Usually I only remember numbers, but yeah. Want to hear it again? All right. So yeah, the 2, 2, and 2. That's a really, really common one. And again, it just completely fucks my immersion. Just every goddamn time. The number 2 doesn't seem to be the biggest problem. The also to and the prepositional to are the other ones that people switch. It makes me nuts. Yes, you want to hear it again? All right. About, above, across, after, against, along, among, around, at, before, behind, below, beneath, beside, besides, between, beyond, by, down, during, for, from, in, inside, into, like, near, of, off, on into, over, through to, toward, under, underneath, until, up, upon, with, within, without. If you hear any of those, you're probably queuing up a prepositional phrase. Without mercy, on top of the chair. All of those are prepositional phrases. You understood a handful of, they're all words. All right. I versus me. Okay. This one is more of a pet peeve for me than it is for other people, but you're in my stream, so you get to deal with my pet peeves. But there's actually a very simple way to know when to do this, because people aren't always sure if they should use I versus me. Very, very, very simple way to look at this is if you take out the other person. So for example, you and I went to the park, or you and me went to the park. Take out the other person, take out the you. Is it I went to the park or me went to the park? Well, obviously it's I went to the park. If you take out the other person in the phrase, it clarifies it so much. Or she went with me, or she went with I. Well, duh, what do you think? With me. The me is the object form. It's the one that's being acted upon. The I is the action form. You will never say, me do this. But you will also never say, this happened to I. Me is being acted on, I is doing the action. But again, most of the time when people struggle with this, it's because there's another person. Like, Bob, Dan, and I, blah, blah, blah. Or I went there with, whatever. It's usually because there's other names that are kind of messing it up, that are muddying the waters. Take those names out, try it without. Then you should be able to see. This rule of thumb exists in German. I'm so stupid. You are not stupid. Okay. Lie, lay, lain, and laid. God, I forgot I put this on here because this is complicated. It is I. Sounds more faux theatrical. It does. You need this one. Okay. Oh God, I gotta come up with the... All right, easiest way to think of it. People lie down. People don't lay down. But you can lay something down on a surface. You can lay down an object. You will never be laying down. You will be lying down. Maybe think of it as people always lie. But people will lie down. The past tense of lie is lain. I have lain down. Laid is again for the objects. It's for laying something down. I laid that down on the table. You have not laid down. You really want to know if your favorite one is on this list? Yeah, there's a lot on this list. I forgot some of these. I was in a mood when I wrote this list, and I'm like, and another thing. Lie, lay, lay, and laid. But yeah, just the simplest way to think of it. People lie, and people have lain. Objects lay, and objects have laid. So I'm going to leave it at that because I don't want to dig down. You haven't seen lain used outside of older English. This is, I think, one of the last slides, Muff. Don't worry. Lain is still accurate. People don't realize they're supposed to be using it, but they absolutely should be. Okay. Lose and loose. Oh, God, I hate this one too. I'm making myself angry with this list. Two O's is loose, as in, like, has extra room in it. Think of it that way. The one with extra O's has extra room. These pants are loose. Also, the dog is on the loose. He has so much extra room to run now. Lose is you can't find it anymore. Where did that other O go? Oh no, did you lose it? Yeah, I did. Was that yours, Halo? Was that your favorite? The presenter's notes? Oh no, I'm doing this completely off the cuff. I don't have any notes. My notes are my slides. That's your second favorite, okay. Some of these are really strange to get wrong. You'd be surprised. And the smallest thing, like if someone writes loose change, but they use the wrong loose. You know, the bard walked through the tavern, his loose change jingling in his pocket. You used the wrong loose and suddenly the story fucking sucks. I don't care how good a storyteller you are. If you can't write it properly, you will not get anywhere with it, because all people will think about is how they can't understand you because you just knocked them across the head with the wrong word. All right. It's an it's, muffed, you asked for it. In this case, again, apostrophe, contraction. It's with an apostrophe is it is. That is it. That is the only time you will see this. It's with an apostrophe is it is. It's a contraction. It's a contraction, and I'm using it like this. It's a contraction. Ta-da. It's. I realize this is frustrating. This one is possessive, but it doesn't use the apostrophe because that'd be fucking confusing. We have to draw a line somewhere. So the Minotaur smashed its car. Yeah, its car would not use the apostrophe there. This is one of those situations where they've tried to make it so incredibly clear by just drawing this very hard line that it's is only going to use the apostrophe for contractions. That's it. So if you're talking about it's in any other context, if you're doing a possessive, like the cat put on its shoes or something like that, you have to go without the apostrophe for that. I realize it doesn't make a lot of sense considering the two uses of an apostrophe are possessives and contractions. And this seems like an exception to that rule. And it sort of is, but it sort of isn't. I don't really consider it an exception because they have drawn the lines so incredibly clearly. Chat loses its shit. Oh boy. You know what? You missed the chance to put a period outside those quotes. You almost had the perfect storm of horribleness. Just so close. I'm gonna go cry now. Yeah, I am sorry about the add a semicolon. No, a hanging semicolon where nothing happens after it. That's the worst. Then and than. Okay. Then is time. With an E is time. Then is time. Then and now. We'll go to the store and then we will go to the arcade. Then is time. Than is like a comparative thing. Taller than, smaller than, better than. That's really it for these. Like again, I can't really think of a mnemonic that will help you. Then is time. Now and then. If that's how you can think of it, like if you're not really sure, just say now and then to yourself and which one makes sense. That one. Affect and effect. Oh, I hate this one. God, why am I making myself so angry today? Okay. There's actually an easy way to remember this, but people just don't. Affect is the action. Affect, action. They both start with A. So if you are affecting something, like I affected her perception of me, that's an action, so it's the A version. Effect is the result. Effect is the object. The effect of my action was to piss her off. I've addressed that in audio. Yes, I did. Now, effect on its own is also a verb, like you can effect change, but most people don't use it that way and it is confusing. So I'm not going to, I mean, you can, but honestly, it sounds pretentious. Don't do it. Affect for action, effect for the thing that happens. It's really all it comes down to. So you're not going to effect somebody. You're going to affect them. And you're not going, I mean, also affect is also a noun, but again, we're not going to, these are more obscure when you use them the wrong way. So just for purposes of simplicity, affect is the action. The fireball has an area of effect. Exactly. The effect is what's happening. It's not the action itself. Avoid them at all costs. If you just stick to those, you don't, I mean, an affect, like how somebody looks, their affect, yes, that can be a thing. An effect can be a verb if you're effecting change or whatever. But those two are pretty obscure. If you just stick to affect is the action, effect is the thing, you can use them safely. It's fine. Oh, these are a couple of examples of things that I absolutely hate. I have a friend who is incredibly smart. She's so smart. And yet she says supposedly. There is no B in this word. It's supposedly. Yeah, she says supposedly. Some people will say to all intensive purposes. It's not. It's to all intents and purposes. Yeah. These are just a couple of examples of when people just completely, when they bone apple tea things. And this just comes down to general knowledge. If nobody's ever told you what the colloquialism is, you probably will say it wrong, you pronounce it wrong or whatever. But if you're not sure, when in doubt, check on these things. And also, again, trust your editors. If somebody reads something and goes, it's not bone apple tea, it's bon appetit. Listen to them. I did verb bon apple tea. It can be to all or for all intents and purposes, or to all intents and purposes. To, I believe, is the older style. Bon apple tea. Yeah, if you've never seen it written down, if you've only ever heard it spoken, it's very likely you could get this wrong. But this is one of those cases where, I mean, supposedly is never right. Also, words like irregardless, not a word. The word is regardless. There's no such word as irregardless. I don't even know how these words come about. Who invented that? Oh yeah, pronunciation is one thing. I'm not talking about pronunciation because obviously words in other languages are going to be mispronounced across the board. I'm talking about, like, this is not pronounced supposedly. There is no B in this word. This is not pronounced intensive purposes. When you see it written out, you can see it's intents and purposes. So it's really about knowing what the phrase is, having seen it written, and then writing it correctly. And then using it correctly. Because, like I said, that friend of mine, she's ridiculously smart, but every time she says supposedly, my brain immediately goes, oh, you dumb. And I hate that because she's not dumb. She's really smart. I don't understand why she holds on to that word. Or people that say Pacific instead of specific. Well, that's my Pacific thing. No, please. Watch for things like that. Watch for those pitfalls because, again, they make you sound really dumb. And you're not dumb. You just don't know. Please don't be dumb. Okay. Now, let's bring it all together, shall we? Assembling interesting sentences. In a general way, you want to vary your sentence structure. You don't want every sentence in a paragraph to be, I did this period. I did this period. I saw this period. I said this period. Like subject, verb. Yeah, no. You don't want that. You want some introductory clauses. You want some mixing up a little bit of your sentence structure. That said, if you go hard into mixing up your sentence structure to a point where every sentence is a different structure, that also does stand out as weird and jarring and trying way too hard. So don't do that. My general rule of thumb is if I've got a paragraph with like 5 sentences in it, I will make sure at least 2 of them are different structure. I'll be like, I saw a bird, period. first sentence. Despite the fact that it was dark out, comma, the bird was vibrantly colored, comma, so I could see it. Despite the fact that whole introductory clause is a different structure from the sentence before. Then I can go back to the old structure. I liked the bird a lot. Also, a lot is 2 words. I didn't even put that on the pet peeve list, but y'all know better. A lot is 2 words. A lot. All right, we're clear on that. Couldn't care less. It's not, if you could care less, that means you could care. Like a little bit, but you still could care. If you couldn't care less, you literally are out of fucks to give. You could not care any less than you currently do. Yeah, Americans say could because Americans are, the public education system has failed a lot of people. Oh, rain, rain, and rain. That's a good one. Let's talk about that. Okay. R-A-I-N is weather. Things falling from the sky. It's rain and men. Hallelujah. R-E-I-N is like a horse, the reins that you use on a horse to guide it around. If you're taking the reins of a business, it is R-E-I-N, taking the reins. Reign with the G is leadership. The king reigns over his kingdom. If it helps, the reign with the G is like the king with the G. The king reigns. They both have G's. But reign with a G is not used for guiding a horse. It's not used for taking ownership of a company or something, unless it's the ownership is the king, and then he's reigning. So someone can reign over their kingdom by taking the reins of power on a rainy day and have all of those words be fine. I reign over the horse with the rein and the rein. Yep, absolutely accurate. I'll rein it in. They say that. They say rein it in with an A. See, I mostly see people confusing with or without the G. They get the E part right, but they get the G part wrong. They forget that the G is only for, like, kings. But I've never seen someone say rein it in with an A. Ah! That's painful. NG, you are cruising for a band, man. Your brain hurts so bad. I'm sorry. Okay, so yeah, vary your sentence structure. Makes your writing more interesting. Using active over passive voice. Try to make sure people are doing things, not having things done to them. If you can, try to remove every instance of the be verbs from your writing. Instead of saying the sun was bright, because that's incredibly passive, you can say the sun shone brightly. The shone is now the action. The sun is actively shining. It's not, the brightness is not acting upon, it's not just being bright. It is actively shining. Watch for those be verbs. They are boring and they drag your shit down. When in doubt, take them out. Put some action in there. All right. Making creative word choices without being insufferable or ignorant. We talked about this. Don't say supposedly. Don't whip out the thesaurus and use some 16th century version of some old English word because you think it makes you sound smarter. It doesn't. Please don't do that. Getting the punctuation right, we talked about that. I did not hit on all the punctuation marks, of course. I just chose my favorite 4, or my most nitpicky 4. We can do a whole other stream on that, but I probably won't because that sounds really boring. And doing your due diligence. Letting people read your shit and then taking their notes. Letting people give you honest feedback, making edits, and making cuts. This is the hardest thing for a lot of writers. They put all the time into writing it. The last thing they want to do is cut something out, but sometimes it is the right call. Cutting things may make your shit stronger. You have to be okay with that. God, of course you did. All right. That's that, you guys. With that, we have reached the 2-hour mark and the end of this story. For now. There'll be another one next week. You did it! Shadow Gundam with the Goober Redeem. You are, without a doubt, a sweet goober, and I appreciate you being here for this beating of a stream. I know it was. I hope it wasn't too painful. This one was very heavy on mechanics. I don't like doing these because they are so nitpicky, but I also feel like they're very important, and if you can get this shit right, your writing will be so much better. It'll be so much stronger. It'll flow so much better. You'll be able to paint a picture instead of just tell a story. And that can only help you, especially if you're trying to get published. So you didn't finish writing the last one? Oh, well, watch the VOD. Hydrate. All right, guys, I'm going to leave you there. Next week, I believe we're going to be doing some story writing live, featuring Rural Spectre, who's very eager to do this. He's got a lot of shitpost ideas. So we're going to try and apply some of these things. We're going to try and put some of these things into practice. God help us. It's going to be a thing. All right. Until then, as always, you guys be good, and I'll talk to you soon.